Welcome to the Content Amplified podcast, brought to you by Masset. Our goal is to help you get more from your marketing content. Each episode is a 10 to 15 minute interview with industry experts that share amazing insights to help you squeeze as much juice from your content as you possibly can. Here's today's interview.
Welcome back to another episode of Content Amplified. Today I'm joined by Blair. Blair, welcome to the show.
Hey, so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Excited to have you on the show. Blair, we've got a fun subject today. In fact, a part of this, I even had to Google what this word meant. Like, this is the ultimate learning experience for me and everyone else on the show. But before we dive into that, Blair, let's get to know you. First and foremost, what do you love about marketing and content? Second of all, let's get to know your background and your career a little bit.
Yeah. So marketing and content, I actually never thought I would get into marketing. It just was happenstance. But what I love about it is the fact that I could be so creative. And I've always loved content. I actually thought I was going to be a technical writer, which would have been vastly different than it is today. And I'm very happy that I'm in that creative side of the space. And I think what I love the most about marketing is just falling in love with the product that you're trying to sell, creating a story, kind of listening to your audience, understanding their needs and building content around that. And then as far as my background goes, so I've been in the content space for probably more than 15 years now. And I started off at a literary journal. And I was an editor there. And then that was like my creative outlet. And then I went to school for professional and technical communications. Hence, I wanted to be a technical writer. Mm-hmm. And then I just had a job opportunity. It was between being a technical writer for an engineering firm or being a marketing communications person for a builder's risk insurance company. So I took a
little niche. Yeah.
I took a gamble and I went for the builder's risk insurance company. And it really paid off. It was an internal communications role. I got to be super creative. I had a lot of fun with that. And that kind of just blossomed my career. And then I somehow segued into the procurement space. Also very niche. And so I worked at SAP Ariba for a couple of years. And then I went over to a company called Medius, and they do procurement and AP automation. And then I am currently at Orchestro, which is a startup, and they focus primarily on procurement software. And they utilize machine learning and behavioral theory, which is really, really fun and unique for the space. So
very cool. That's exciting. I love it. So this will be fun.
Yeah.
Okay. So what we're going to talk about today, it's an interesting term. Again, I told you I had to Google it, but content atomization and amplification. Obviously, I get the amplification part, but Blair, talk us through real quick, what is content atomization and amplification? And really the second part of the question, how and when and why should I think about using this system?
Yeah. So content amplification, I was the same way. I'd heard of that before. So it's like basically the process of using various channels to increase the reach and impact of your content, utilizing things like paid media or email marketing or social to get that content out there. Content atomization was also new to me. It was something that when I joined this role at Orchestro, I looked up because currently the team that I'm working in, it's a marketing team of 4, and I'm the only person that deals with content. And so when you have not a lot of resources, you kind of need to think outside of the box of how you're going to churn out all this content that, you know, your leadership executive team are ultimately asking for.
Yep.
And
every content marketer is nodding their head. Yep. I know what you're saying.
The pressure is there, you know, and in the beginning, like I tried to keep up with it and I was like, okay, well, you know, I don't really have that much time resource. So I need to figure out what I can do with the content that we have. And so I found out about content atomization, and basically it's taking like a really meaty, long piece of content that really resonates with your audience, and kind of breaking it up into bits, hence the atomization. And so what you're really looking at is focusing on like the key message in the piece and how you can decimate that across many channels. So, for instance, like the piece that I'm talking about at the current company I work at, it talks about predictive procurement orchestration, which nobody knows what that is. When I joined the company, I didn't know what that was. And so I discovered this piece. It had been written before I joined, and it was great. Like there was so much information in it, but it was just sitting there and it was kind of hidden. And so I knew we spent a lot of money on it. I knew we had an analyst work on it. So I knew it was a good quality piece of content. And it was like, well, how can I take this piece and really help define what that predictive procurement orchestration is without someone having to read 20 pages of it?
Yep.
There are people in procurement that will read that, believe it or not. But there are a lot of people that are just on the go and they don't have time to look at this stuff. So I sat down, looked at the piece, kind of established what the message would be. And then I was like, okay, what are our top channels? So we have, for social, we have LinkedIn. That's like our main, we have like Facebook, Twitter, all that fun stuff, but LinkedIn's our top channel that performs social wise. So I was like, okay, I can break up and do about 8 social posts around this piece. I had paid media budget as well, which I was like, okay, we use 6 cents and we also use LinkedIn ads as well. So like, let's break that down and kind of figure out like what assets we can put there. And then I also did an email campaign and nurtures as well. I was like, this is such a good piece and there's so many good quotes in it. So it's like, pull a quote card from it. We actually had a few people, like the analysts, sit with us and do like a few video clips for it. So that's like the whole process of what content atomization is. It's really taking these big, meaty pieces and reusing them. So I think like something that's important to know is that I know a lot of like leadership teams and executive folks are really saying like, keep churning out more and more and more content. And you're just like, there's only so much you can do. And I think it's important to kind of push back to them and say, listen, like repetition is not bad when you're talking about your product. I think it keeps your brand top of mind with your audience. And something that I think about, even with just like social media, if you post about something, once, and then a couple months later do the same post, people aren't really going to notice that you did that. Not that I'm recommending it, but you could get away with that if you think about it. Think how much you consume, and it'll look new again to you if you see it again. I wouldn't recommend doing that exactly. Like I switch it up. I'll use a different image. I'll use a different quote, things like that. But like really, if the piece is as timeless as this one was, why not? Why not reuse it? So, yeah.
Plus, it takes a lot of different touch points for someone to actually be able to see it. I mean, as much as we would love LinkedIn to show our content to everyone that we're connected with, only a small fraction of them see it. So,
exactly.
I think a lot of times we feel like we're being repetitive, but at the end of the day, we're the only ones seeing the content more than once. No one else really is. So I think that's really powerful.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
When you're looking at the strategy, I mean, you talked about like the constant need for more content, and it sounds like you're fulfilling that through, the atomization side of things. You've taken something really powerful and broken it down. How do you go, logistically convince the rest of the organization to let you write a bigger piece of content, spend time, effort, and money on it, and potentially like take a time out from posting, such frequent content? How do you kind of like pitch that and get people interested in that, and then talk about, like, hey, we can reuse this for the next 3-6 months? How do you kind of go about that process?
It was, I'm not going to lie, a struggle at first. I remember like my first month at the company, I had a meeting in New York City with, at the time he was not our CEO. The next day he was promoted to our CEO, which I'm like, I'm glad I didn't know it when I did this presentation. I remember just putting this all together about content atomization and kind of explaining my tactic to him. And I could see that there was a little bit of resistance there. Like,
Mm.
why wouldn't you create more new big pieces of content? And I had to kind of explain to him, like, well, first of all, we already had, like, it wasn't just this one piece. We had about 5 or 6 pieces that my coworker had worked on with analysts. And I was like, listen, like, there's a lot of value here. I think that we can use these in new ways instead of just letting them sit and letting the money rot, which is always, I find, a little cheat, which I'm sure many content people know. But when you talk about money to executives, that's when they listen. Like, if you say that you're wasting money, they're like, okay, like, pump the brakes. We need to do that. So kind of like, really just like playing to that as well as kind of like one of my strong suits, like being like, this is the value of what we can bring to the company. This is like, the metrics that we can meet. This is how we increase our brand awareness. This is how we get people to understand what predictive procurement orchestration is,
Yeah.
So yeah. And as far as like going to them for new, bigger pieces, I kind of like, my rule of thumb is I try to do like one big piece of content per quarter. For me, that's manageable as a team of one. Thankfully, since being here, I do have like one contractor that helps me from time to time.
Yeah.
So we'll kind of like brainstorm, think about what that piece is going to be, and then like execute that for the quarter. And then typically, like, let's say we were going to do a new one for Q1, then Q2 would be when we atomize it, and figure out how we're going to promote it and all that fun stuff. So,
okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think just getting that executive buy-in, getting them excited, having them understand like exactly what reach this piece will have is how I kind of work on getting them involved.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So if I heard you right, you said, if you're doing it on a quarterly cadence, and you have one piece of content, we're going to create it this quarter. That means the following quarter is the atomization of it, right? That's promoting it while I'm writing the next piece of content. You do those at the same time.
Yeah.
Do you ever go back to older pieces? Like, do you have like additional refresh? And is this all you're posting, or do you even like layer in new stuff with that? How do you kind of balance it all out?
Yeah. Sometimes I feel like a Wonder Woman. So it's not these big pieces. I mean, we're putting out like 4 or 5 blogs a month. We have a great PR agency that I work with that, is constantly churning news pieces out that we can also do like, so I also manage our social account. Like I have it all built out until like, I think September, and I have a post every day of the business week. And people think I'm crazy for doing this, but it's something I enjoy. But I'm like, I have so much content. Why wouldn't I want to share this? You know? So yeah. But yeah, so we're still doing other things. It's just those big pieces that take a lot of time that we're doing quarterly.
Switching to another question, actually. So when you look at it, like you have these marquee pieces of content, what typical format are you putting those in? Are they video? Are they written? What are some of your recommendations there? Especially because you know that when you create it, you're going to take it, break it into pieces and share it. And then also, like, does that turn into semi-long content? Like, is that powering your blogs, or is that purely like distribution through social channels? Mm-hmm. What does that look like?
Yeah. So I just remembered part of your other question, which is, do we redo the pieces? And I just want to answer that. Yes. And I actually haven't been here long enough to do that, but we just redid the piece I was talking about earlier. We just refreshed it because it was written in 2021. And so we refreshed it and we kind of gave it a spin towards the manufacturing industry, which is where we're focusing right now.
Very cool.
So we do that.
And I love it. No, that's really smart. That's great. Don't letting it rot by not atomization. I can't say that word, but, and then on top of that, refreshing it as a piece of content to give it the new updates, especially as the business is shifting directions, stuff like that. It's good to do. I love that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if it's a good piece of content that's not going to like expire, it's not dated in some way, like you might as well reuse it, do some rewrites. So, and then as far as the content that we kind of pull from those big pieces, It really depends. So I try to do at least a blog or two, based like kind of like veering off the topic. So for the like what is predictive procurement orchestration piece, I did a blog on that kind of went a little bit deeper because we had a lot of questions from customers of like, what does that entail? There's some apprehension around AI, which I completely understand. So kind of like assuaging their fears there, like, hey, like this isn't meant to replace your job. It's meant to help support your job. So kind of like digging into those, like that kind of feedback we hear from sales of like why they're so apprehensive about the technology. We do a Gartner piece every quarter. So I tend to try to do a blog around that as well. Depending on like what the topic is, we might like squeeze out like a small, like little white paper, like a 2 or 3 page or an infographic, to be more visual. It just really like depends like how in depth we want to go. Like I'd say the sky is the limit. Like if you can think of it, you can do it. Just making sure that you do it like quality wise and in a way that kind of resonates with your audience, because I know some folks love infographics. Some find them, I don't want to say like immature, but like, too cartoony, or it depends on your audience. Like procurement people, they're very serious. They don't want to see like these little cartoony things and like all that fun stuff, but like they love a good paper. They love a good blog. Like just kind of understanding where your audience goes and what they're looking at can really help you decide what you want to atomize. So.
Well, Blair, as promised, these episodes go by quick.
Yes.
I have learned a ton. These are amazing pointers and tips. My vocabulary has grown. I think this is awesome. I love it. Blair, if anyone wants to continue the conversation online and connect with you, how and where can they find you?
You can find me on LinkedIn. Blair Romaine is my full name. And then, I'm trying to think where else they can find me. That's probably the only place where I talk about my content stuff.
Sounds good.
So
good.
That's what they can find.
We'll link to it in the show notes. I love it.
Awesome.
Again, thanks for the time today and the insights, Blair.
Yeah. And one other thing, Ben, real quick, just to leave you with a little tidbit. So just for the listeners, research has shown that doing integrated campaigns and like content amplification across more than 4 channels can outperform single or dual channel campaigns by 300%. So,
wow.
Try it out, guys.
That's the data. Give it a shot. I love it. This is amazing. Blair, I love it. Thank you so much for the insights.
Thank you so much for having me, Ben. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to the Content Amplified podcast. Please subscribe and leave us a review. And for additional ways to get more out of your content, visit our website at getmasset.com. That's getmasset.com. And tune in next time to the Content Amplified podcast.